They are the most dangerous weather events in Florida.
We heard everything start to blow, and then the power went out.
Hurricanes hundreds of miles wide can wipe out entire neighborhoods and cities.
Everything we've worked for is just underwater.
30 years ago, Florida was hit by one of the most destructive storms in history. And tonight, we're looking back with a survivor.
Not long after we made it into that room, we heard a massive explosion.
And looking forward at how the hurricane hunters are preparing for the future.
Our main job on this mission is to drop these.
As our team of meteorologists help you and your family get ready for the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. This is a Severe Weather Center 9 special, The Calm Before the Storm.
Welcome to the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Terry, and I can't believe it. This is my 27th hurricane season here in Central Florida. Certainly learned a lot of us have over the last 3 decades. But one of the areas we really need to learn more about are these rapidly intensifying storms that come in without a lot of notice. Cassie?
And that's really the key, is they get very strong very quickly, which means your lead time for preparation is typically shorter. So we talked to the National Hurricane Center. We got a lot of new information about these rapid intensifying storms and how we can better forecast them.
One of the ways that we learn more about is direct observation of these storms. So that's why we get into the hurricane hunters. We send this guy, meteorologist George Waldenberg. You've been in 2 hurricane hunter missions.
What better way to take hurricane measurements than from within the hurricane, right, Tom?
Right.
I've gone on a couple missions. I took a lot of video. Here's some of it. But coming up, I'll show you what it's like to go hurricane hunting.
He was at 45,000 feet a couple of times. Intrepid George Waldenberger. And we go through storms with preparations for our family. Meteorologist Brian Shields, you've been with me, 17?
It's a lot, don't
count. I don't know, we're stopped counting. But you are great at getting kids through this.
Yeah, and storms can be scary, as you well know, but you always say preparation is key, and we have some new tips on how to take your kids through a storm.
All right, we'll have more on that coming up, too. And I can't believe it's been 30 years. 1992, I was forecasting in South Texas at the time that Hurricane Andrew was a Cat 5 and hit Homestead. 44 deaths, billions in damage. And meteorologist Rusty McCraney, you found some video that this family hadn't seen in decades. You talked to him about the storm.
Yeah, look, Tom, Andrew, the hurricane for a generation of Floridians. Christina Vite and her family, they rode out Andrew in their South Florida home. I sat down with her and she shared her family's dramatic story. Christina Vite celebrated her 5th birthday in June of 1992 with family, friends, and pony rides at their Cutler Ridge home just south of Miami. Little did she or anyone in her family know their world would be turned upside down just 2 months later. Let's go back 2 days before Hurricane Andrew struck.
So my parents had planned a trip for us to Walt Disney World here in Orlando, and they said, well, let's just go on our family trip. I think we're in the clear. And we weren't. We called my grandfather down in Miami, and he said, where are you guys? And they said, oh, we're in Orlando. We just left Disney World. And he said, there's a hurricane headed right for us. You need to come home.
Not fully understanding the magnitude of what Hurricane Andrew would become, Christina's father, Raul, decides to drive back to South Miami with her and her mom, Maria, the day before Andrew hits. After quick preparations, Andrew barrels over South Florida during the early morning hours of August 24th with winds of 165 miles per hour. Christina recalls waking up to find her father.
And I remember he was sitting in the family room watching TV, tracking the storm. And I came out to see him, and he looked at me and he said, I think it's here. It was almost like the house was starting to breathe. The walls would swell in and swell out. And this is the interior walls of the house. And every time the walls would expand, and when they would come back, water was starting to pour down the walls like a waterfall. And my father said, I don't think we're gonna be safe here. The master bedroom closet was starting to fill with water. We went into my dad's office, which was that one room that had the window fully covered. My dad grabbed a piece of wood that he found in his office, and he put it over the opening of the desk while the 3 of us tried to hide under the desk. And my mom tells me that his arms were shaking from how strong the wind was inside of the house, and that he kept telling her, I don't know if I can hold it anymore, I don't know if I can hold it.
During the brunt of Hurricane Andrew, Christina passes out from the drop in pressure.
My mom tells me that when the storm finally ended, that we opened that office door and walked out and looked straight up into the sky. And the house was just devastated. Once we started surveying the damage, we realized that the room we were in was the only one that was still intact.
The room your family stayed in was the only room that was left of your house. Everything else was gone.
Yeah, my dad's last-minute decision to move us into that room probably saved our lives.
Raul grabs his camcorder and films the destruction of their house and neighborhood. Roofs gone, sliding glass doors obliterated to shards, cars overturned, rooms exposed to blue sky, streets unpassable.
And Christina's room. Oh, Christina, we'll get you another room.
And we walk outside to just an unrecognizable neighborhood. I mean, there's no landmarks left. There's nothing familiar about it anymore.
The family decides to take a drive and document the destruction. Their drive would tell the story of the Florida City Homestead area. Cars piled on top of each other at dealerships, massive trees uprooted, a truck overturned with a business sign that had pierced it, and debris piles so high it looks like they could touch the sky.
They would stop people at the toll plazas to check their ID to make sure that they actually lived there, because people were trying to come down and rob and take from us, even though we had already, lost so much. And it was just the constant sound of sirens, helicopters, Humvees coming down the street, driving around, military vehicles.
Look at Good Shepherd, Christina's at school.
Power would not be restored for 30 days. They would get food rations from the National Guard and live in a FEMA trailer for 6 months. They never rebuilt their home, choosing to start fresh in a new neighborhood.
In many ways, there's a physical scar in the Miami area left by Andrew, and then there's an emotional scar left by Andrew for the people that went through it.
Yeah, and they never want to go through that again. Everybody remembers Andrew down in Miami, and everybody has their own story to tell about how that storm changed their lives from that point on.
Although Christina's father, Raul, has since passed, he did share with Christina some regret bringing their family back down to South Florida during Andrew, and her mom, Maria, vows to never go through a hurricane again. Her biggest piece of advice to you is always wear shoes during a hurricane, because they didn't, because you never know how that will impact your lives.
Yeah, sometimes even back in Oklahoma, in tornadoes and storms, you can even put on bicycle helmets, things like that to help protect you. Thank you, Rusty. Incredible story. And of course, we will not ever have a storm named Andrew again. It has been retired. George Waldenberger, you have more on the names.
This list of 21 names will be the storms for the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season, starting with Alex, ending with Walter. These lists of names are rotated every 6 years. Now, if we go through all 21 of these names, we won't be going to use the Greek alphabet, unlike recent years. Instead, there's a second set of names from this supplemental list that have never been used before. Now, some storms are so deadly or destructive, their names are retired for future use. And since the busy year of 2004, 34 storms have had the distinction of getting retired. That includes Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean from 2004, Katrina and Wilma from 2005, Sandy, which was dubbed a superstorm in 2012, and Irma and Maria from 2017. As we mentioned, storm lists are rotated every 6 years, so Matthew and Otto from 2016 are replaced this year by Martin and Owen. Much more to come tonight on Calm Before the Storm after the break.
Hurricanes are growing bigger and stronger, faster than ever before. We're talking with the experts at the National Hurricane Center why that's the case.
If they do that rapid strengthening just before landfall, can be a big problem.
Climb aboard as we go for a ride with the Hurricane Hunters. See the technology they have on their planes to give us a better idea of where the storms are headed. Plus, the changes being made across Florida to prevent power outages after the worst has passed.
It's no secret that we've seen some pretty active hurricane seasons recently, and many of these storms have packed a pretty big punch. In fact, looking back over the past 5 years, most of the more notable storms that have impacted the U.S. have all undergone something called rapid intensification. But what is rapid intensification, and why do you need to keep an ear out for that term as we head into this upcoming hurricane season?
Well, rapid intensification is when a tropical storm system's maximum sustained winds strengthen quickly in a short period of time. And we define that as a 35-mile-per-hour increase or more over a 24-hour window. We've seen this happen in many storms over the years, but more recently we saw in Irma in 2017, with Michael in 2018, Dorian back in 2019, and impacting the Louisiana coast, Laura and Ida back in 2020 and just last year.
All hurricanes will undergo rapid intensification if they were given perfect conditions.
But what are those perfect conditions? For a storm to undergo rapid intensification, it needs a few things. First of which, low vertical wind shear, which means winds higher up in the atmosphere can't be stronger than what we have at the surface. If they are stronger, they essentially rip the tops of these storms off and you don't get the growth. But if you have consistent winds stretching from the base of the storm to the top of the storm really has the ability to grow and to strengthen. You also need, for rapid intensification, very warm, deep water, as well as a moisture-rich environment, and no land interaction for these storms, something that we see a lot of in these locations, which is on both sides of Florida. We've got it closer to the Bahamas as well as in portions of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, thankfully, perfect conditions don't happen with every storm, but now and again, we do get the Goldilocks conditions and storms just take off. And in most cases, you won't get the 5-day lead time with these erupting storms.
If they do that rapid strengthening just before landfall, can be a big problem, again, making sure the right folks are evacuating, moving away from the coastline ahead of that storm surge.
But there is some good news. Forecasting for rapidly intensifying storms has increased over the last decade. According to the National Hurricane Center, the margin of error in forecasting storms' intensity has actually been cut in half. And we'll only see continued improvement as our capability of seeing the guts or the core of these storms has improved tremendously with satellite capabilities, as well as getting vital data from the Hurricane Hunter flights. The key takeaway for us Floridians is to be prepared and be ready to act, especially when you hear us say a storm may rapidly intensify as your prep time for potentially catastrophic impacts is dropped significantly.
Now, the National Hurricane Center gave me a really interesting statistic that I think puts this into pretty good perspective. Over the last 100 years, there have been 8 storms with winds of 150 miles per hour or greater that have hit the U.S. So that would be a very strong Category 4 or Category 5. Now, of these 8 storms, none of them existed 5 days out, and all 8 of them didn't reach hurricane status until 50 hours before landfall.
Yeah, I remember Hurricane Michael back in 2018 rapidly intensified. Less than 3 days, went from a fledgling tropical storm to a landfalling Cat 5 in the Panhandle.
Right, and a lot of people will want to link climate change with these intense storms, and really the resounding answer is we can't pinpoint one storm being linked to climate change itself, but we have been seeing them skew towards the stronger side. And a really interesting stat, just in the last 5 years, the U.S. has had more Cat 4 and Cat 5 landfalls than we had from the entire stretch of 1963 to 2016.
A lot of them hit the Gulf Coast, right, through Louisiana and hopefully not Florida this year. Now, scientists believe that climate change is causing more rain from hurricanes. The rainfall totals in 2020 were up to 11% higher in hurricanes that year, more than normal hurricanes. There was a similar change for tropical storms. That information was published in the journal Nature Communications. After storm surge, rainfall is the second biggest killer from tropical systems that make landfall. One tool we have to help us identify rapid hurricane intensification before it happens is the data that we get from hurricane hunters. And George, you're the kind of guy that you have been in the hurricane hunters twice here at Channel 9.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I flew on hurricane hunter missions around Hurricane Irma in 2017 and around Dorian in 2019. I actually just went through some of this video and it's never been seen before. So here it is. I want to show you what it's like to actually go hurricane hunting. This is a pilot's view, flying over the open waters. It looks calm, almost soothing, but as we look across the cockpit, the view to the right reveals more unsettled pockets of weather.
There's some good thunder heads back here.
This massive cloud shield was the central dense overcast of a hurricane.
The outer band.
This is what it looked like to fly around Hurricane Irma back in 2017. Then, in 2019, we flew along on another hurricane hunter mission, this one to Dorian. The mission began with a pre-flight briefing.
We always do that inner ring in a clockwise fashion.
The flight director and the pilot.
It's a big deal to be flying these storms, especially when my parents live in Vero Beach.
Both led the mission on this high-flying Gulfstream G4 hurricane hunter. It's nicknamed Gonzo after the famous long-nosed Muppet, referencing the plane's massive nose cone sheathing a radar instrument. And there's another radar on the tail. But our main job on this mission is to drop these. They're called dropsondes. They fall through the atmosphere taking weather measurements that help computer models better predict a storm's path. Our mission was to drop one at each of these 33 strategic points along the flight after we took off. We're in the Hurricane Hunter flying 45,000 feet high, right around the inner core of Hurricane Dorian. At this height, pilots had a good view over Hurricane Dorian on the right side of the plane. Behind them, meteorologists ensuring we hit our target points and analyzing data coming in. And in the far back of the plane, Nick is an engineer. He's holding the dropsonde. He was also testing the dropsonde, that it worked and was connected properly before dropping it at each of those points along the flight plan. So, Tom, it's all about getting to those specific locations within the hurricane so you can directly take measurements.
Yeah, that was a lot to do. It's so involved. How long do these missions generally take?
Well, they can vary. The ones I went on were about 8 hours flying back and forth around the Caribbean or Atlantic. But if you put this in a straight line, it would be like flying from here to London.
Minus the first class.
Yeah,
or
we're
even
back in
the coach. Yeah, you're sitting in jump seats. What's the scariest part for all this?
Actually, one of the scariest parts for me was the pre-flight safety routine. The crew had to teach me how to use a fire extinguisher, and then I had to put on and use an oxygen mask, and that was before we even took off.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of something that is hard for me to even remember doing without, the forecast cone, also known as the cone of uncertainty. Starting with the 2002 season, this brand new tool was used to not only give the forecast track for a tropical system, but also show the average forecast error. The bigger this cone, the bigger the uncertainty in the forecast track. And back 20 years ago, the cone forecast only went out 3 days in the future, and on that third day had an average margin of error of nearly 400 miles. That's a lot. Here's one of the forecast cones for Hurricane Kyle off our East Coast back in 2002. And you can see just how big the cone was and thus how much uncertainty there was in the forecast back then. Plus, only 2/3 of the time will the storm actually stay inside the forecast cone. That was true back then, as it still is today. But with ever better computers, satellites, hurricane hunter technology, and more, our forecast accuracy gets better all the time. So much so that the cone was certainly put on a diet. Here's the track from Hurricane Ida last year. As you can tell, the cone's only about half as wide as it was 20 years ago. And it's also been expanded all the way out to 5 days in the future. As our forecast accuracy for storms gets better, the National Hurricane Center is giving us other forecasts in addition to this familiar cone. One of a hurricane's biggest threats along the coast is the storm surge. The winds of a storm can blow high water levels onshore, creating widespread destruction. Today, we're now able to update storm surge forecasts like this one from Ada back in 2020, giving us a better idea of the stormwater inundation at the coast, or just how high the water could get. This is very important for us in Central Florida as we have dealt with many coastal impacts over the years, most notably Hurricane Matthew in 2016, which ripped apart a long section of A1A in Flagler County and brought more damage to nearby Daytona Beach. Going through a hurricane is a frightening enough experience for adults. Imagine how the kids feel. Coming up, Brian Shields is talking with a licensed mental health counselor about how you can help the little ones stay cool during a disaster. Plus, the essential items you're going to need to have in your home before a hurricane hits so you can stay safe during and after a storm. Now, we had a couple of close calls with Elsa and Fred last year, but it's really been since Hurricane Irma impacted all of us in 2017 that we had to really break out those hurricane kits. Brian Shields joins me right now with more on that.
Yeah, preparing for a hurricane can be difficult for any of us, let alone families with small children. Here are some of the ways you can help children feel more comfortable during a storm. When a storm rages, kids can get lost in the shuffle.
So kids pick up on more than we think that they do.
Brianna Edwards is a licensed mental health counselor and registered play therapist.
A play therapist uses toys and art and other creative experiential modalities to help kids process their feelings and experiences, traumas at a very developmental level.
I know this is a very anxious time, so we're watching this. When a storm approaches, we as adults react and prepare. Kids react too, but in different ways.
That can be something like heightened emotions like anger and anxiety, or it can be more of the shutdown, depression, sadness type behaviors. You might notice sadness with your child. You might notice stomach aches, headaches, difficulty sleeping, so some of those body sensations and body symptoms.
We try to find a quick fix to make them feel better.
A lot of times, in the most well-meaning ways, we show our care to our kids by asking a lot of questions or trying to fix their situation or trying to reassure them really quickly.
So what can we do? Brianna's first tip, reactive listening.
And I find that many children feel unseen when we jump to fixing or dismissing or minimizing. So the more that you can validate what your child's experiencing by using a tool called reflective listening, repeating what you hear the child saying or what you notice happening on their face or in their vocal tone.
Brianna's second tip, empowerment.
Say, how can we prepare for this hurricane party to make it fun? What toys or games do they want to bring? It's helpful to find jobs that your child feels like they're contributing to. What's not good is when we put too much responsibility on our child and they feel like it's their job to be the parent or their job to keep the family safe.
And when they ask questions, there are resources to help.
We want to make the unknown known. This is a way that we help them prepare. And so we can do this through developmentally appropriate educational tools. I know I was just at the Science Center and Channel 9 has their section there on educating about weather and storms. That's a great tool.
Reactive listening and empowerment, two essential tools to help you and your kids remain calm through the storm.
So just getting the kids involved, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, involvement kind of gives them something to do, but you want to get them involved without giving them the burden of safety, but it's a good thing.
That's right. So they are kind of involved in the process. The anxiety level hopefully will go down for all of them. But as we all know, the time to get ready is now. Either building a hurricane kit or checking on the one you made last year or maybe a couple of years ago. And of course, we're all paying more with the current inflation rate. Alyssa Pejic took a hurricane supplies checklist to the store to give us a look at what should go in your kit and why you shouldn't wait till the last minute.
It's that time of year to get your hurricane kit ready, and we're here to help you every step of the way. When you're getting your kit ready, here are a few things that you will want. So I went to Publix, and we do recommend when you are making your kit to get 1 gallon of water per person per day. Just to start off my kit, I did get 2 gallons of water. The next thing are non-perishable items in case you do run out of electricity. Ramen noodles, not just good for college, you guys. You will want to have these in your hurricane kit. Maybe some jam and peanut butter along with some crackers. That's something really easy to make for you and your family. Canned fruits and also canned vegetables. Luckily, these have little knobs on the top, so that way you won't need a can opener. But of course, just in case, have one. Your pet is also a big part of your family, so make sure that you do have extra food for your pets, and that does include medications. Have disposable plates, silverware, and cups. Now to the cleaning supplies. You will want some Clorox disinfecting wipes. Always good to have something to clean around you. Also having some disposable face masks, toilet paper, very important. We know every hurricane season that sometimes this can be hard to come by accumulating it over time. It'll make it easier for you.
Next, assemble a first aid kit, or you can just buy it all together.
Having a good hurricane kit makes the difference between being miserable and making the best of a situation. You might be wondering how much I spent on this shopping trip, and altogether it was $77. I know that sounds like a lot, but you don't have to get it all at one time. Each week, just grab 1 or 2 items and slowly grow your hurricane kit so you can be hurricane ready.
That was Elisa Pichik reporting. It's been 18 years since the last major hurricanes made landfall locally, and a lot has changed since then. Tonight, George Waldenberger looks into how our recent population boom could impact how people evacuate a storm threat. Plus, how changes in the federal government's new flood insurance policies could cost you this year. There are hundreds of thousands of people that have moved to Florida since that devastating year of 2004, where we got pummeled by hurricanes Charlie, Francis, Ivan hit the Panhandle, and Jean hit locally. In fact, more than 900 people move to Florida every day. That comes out to roughly 330,000 people a year, which is like adding a city larger than Orlando every year. Florida's population now estimated to be just over 22 million residents.
We have to go all the way back to 2004 to see the last time we had multiple major hurricanes make landfall in Central Florida in such a short period of time. I looked into how our recent population boom could impact how people evacuate a storm threat. Irma, Matthew, and the relentless 2020 hurricane season. It seems we've been tropically hyperactive, but there's one thing locally we haven't had recently: a direct landfall.
We got to go back to Jean and early 2000s before you really get these big hurricanes coming ashore.
And since that infamous 2004 hurricane season, one of the biggest things that's changed for more than 4 million Central Florida residents.
Our population has increased. In 2004, Brevard County was a little over 500,000, and in 2019, that's the most recent data that we have available so far, and they're at over 600,000 now.
That's a gain of almost 100,000 people in Brevard County. And in Volusia, almost 100,000 more people as well.
We know that this is a booming area in the state.
I sat down with Don Walker with Brevard County Emergency Management, asking him if populations were growing in evacuation zones and if this could make it harder to evacuate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we know that's the case. The concern is the storm surge as a result of the hurricane and flooding that may occur along the coastline. So those are really the areas that are our main focus, and the red on this indicates which areas would be more in harm's way than others.
Brevard County's emergency management webpage has a link to evacuations where you can enter your home's address to see if you live in an evacuation zone or not.
We're in the process of updating the State Regional Evacuation Study Plan, ESRIS for short. We do it every couple years.
Due this summer, this study will give county emergency management officials tools to update and revise evacuation plans as our Florida population grows, eventually targeting 7 million people by 2050. Tom, the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council expects that Central Florida's population will increase to around 7 million by 2050, and that doesn't include tourists.
As our population grows, thankfully, the National Hurricane Center is improving forecasts and storm predictions as well. They recently upgraded the storm surge model with better surge forecasts aimed at giving more lead time for all these evacuations we need.
Now, in addition to evacuations before hurricanes, there's also something else to consider. I talked with the director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham. He said that they had a 100% evacuation rate with Hurricane Laura in Louisiana in 2020. Now, that storm produced a 17-foot storm surge, but nobody died from that surge.
Sadly, though, in the days after, 14 deaths happened because of carbon monoxide poisoning from home generators. That's another reminder that we must plan for safety after the storm passes as well.
If you're one of those new Floridians who moved here for the sunshine, shorelines, or even retirement, hurricane season may be very new territory for you. But even before a storm system forms out in the warm ocean waters, you can get your home and family ready. Here's Corey Sema with some tips for people who are new to Florida.
When I say hurricane season, what comes to your mind?
I'm not prepared. I'm a tiny bit scared because I don't know how to prepare.
Amber Craig is spending her first hurricane season in Northeast Florida in 2022.
Last year, I didn't even think about a hurricane. It was not in my thought process.
Craig is a military spouse and a consultant at Naval Station Mayport. She tells me part of Mayport's storm preparation includes moving the boats out to sea away from the docks. But if a boat goes out, people are on it.
That's family, that's husband, brother, son,
spouse,
who knows what.
Anything. It could be anyone, mom, dad. You could be, the child might be left behind with the other parent and they might have to evacuate. So I can imagine that would be scary, especially as a spouse, and my spouse is leaving and I have a child. How are you going to console that child? I would lean on Fleet and Family for that.
Fleet and Family is an organization at Mayport that helps military members and their families. Craig says they have numerous resources for helping families during hurricane season, and everything is free.
If your house was damaged, we'll have housing here. If you need a quick assist loan, we'll have Navy Marine Corps here. So we will have all the resources in one location that the family might need.
Craig says Fleet and Family also offers counseling services because at the end of the day, family is most important.
You can replace your items, you can't replace yourself. If your spouse goes out on a ship and you decide to stay because it's voluntary evacuation and something happens to you, are they going to miss the house more than they miss you? No, they're going to miss you. So you have to be ready for that.
That was Corey Sema reporting. Thousands of Central Florida residents are paying more for flood insurance this year after the federal government's new flood insurance policies go into effect. Christy Turner explains how this change could cost you.
My house flooded inside.
For nearly 2 decades, Patricia Shirer has lived in Orla Vista, a neighborhood prone to flooding. This is what the area looked like during Hurricane Irma in 2017.
It was bad.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, is changing the way your flood insurance is priced. The restructuring is called Risk Rating 2.0.
This is going to affect nearly 2 million policyholders in Florida, and 80% of policyholders are going to see their flood insurance rates go up by as much as $100 a month. Most of them will see a relatively small increase, about $10 to $20 a month.
Nick Van Zant, a senior research analyst with Quote Wizard, says roughly 20% of homeowners will actually see a decrease.
The less risky areas, they are going to see substantial savings.
All homes are different, so your rates may vary. FEMA will look at things like how close do you live to water, including other factors.
Historical flood frequency, what type of flood it was it a river, a lake, a natural disaster, the individual characteristics of your property, like the soil, the elevation, and then the cost of replacing your home.
FEMA says the revamped rating system enables the agency to set fairer rates.
A lot of people have really been overpaying, and they've been footing the bill for these risky properties. That's not going to be happening anymore.
Shirer was shocked to see the price.
$1,588.
Is that more or less than what you paid?
That's more.
Frustrating for Shirer, but she says it's necessary to protect her home.
I hope it helps.
In Orange County, Christy Turner, Channel 9, Eyewitness News.
Florida does have the cheapest flood insurance rates in the country with an average annual cost of $597, despite the state being in a coastal and high-risk area. The national average is $958.
More and more often these days, power companies are burying their lines underground, whether that's new neighborhoods or going back into old neighborhoods. That's one of the ways the power companies are trying to minimize power outages in hurricanes. Garrett Bedenbaugh shows us.
Each hurricane season, our local electric grid could be put to the test.
One of the main causes of power outages during a storm stems from tree branches falling on power lines.
JEA trims trees that are near above ground power lines on a 2.5-year cycle to help mitigate that risk.
Customers can start preparing now.
They can start preparing by having their trees trimmed by a professional.
And when power is lost, utilities like JEA and FPL now analyze the damage from above.
So drone technology allows us to assess damage to power lines when those roads are inaccessible due to flooding, down trees. It allows us to see what's going on, assess the damages, and then restore power safely and quickly for our customers.
Concrete poles are also beginning to replace wooden poles in some local neighborhoods. They're also switching from above ground power lines to underground. It's all in an effort to improve reliability of the power grid.
We've been making infrastructure improvements like this for over a decade, and it all kind of started back in 2004 and 2005 during the hurricane seasons where we'd get hit by a hurricane and have to rebuild.
Despite all of this, the bottom line is be prepared.
We prepare throughout the year for hurricane season. It is part of our year-round operations, and we've invested millions in our electric and water systems.
And remember, if you see a downed power line, don't touch it. It may still be producing power.
No system is hurricane proof, so customers should prepare to be without power during a hurricane.
I'm meteorologist Gary Biedenball. Back to you, Tom.
If the power does go out in your home, you may want to crank up the generator, but you'll also want to hear the important safety tips to remember to avoid a potentially deadly carbon monoxide poisoning. After Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, thousands fled to Florida. We'll introduce you to an inspiring woman who overcame the storm as her education is putting her on a pathway to success. Hurricane season lasts 6 months, coming to an end on November 30th. So tonight, Brian Shields is breaking down which months we could see the most hurricanes and what's behind all that activity.
Early in the season, we are looking close to home for development. So sometimes you don't have a ton of lead time on some of the storms that pop up. So we're looking in the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and even into the western sections of the Atlantic by the Bahamas as you get closer to the Gulf Stream. So with that said, that's why we're here to let you know when the storms will pop up. Early in the season, there's a couple of reasons they kind of are homegrown storms. You have these old fronts nearby that could spin something up. Plus, it's a little more shallow here, so the water temperatures heat up quicker. Now, as we get just into the month of July, we're still looking in those same spots, but then things kind of broaden out as the rest of the Atlantic basin starts to heat up. And then even more so, we're looking out here August, September into early October with, again, the peak of the season a little bit later. So this is how it breaks down. Average named storms per month. And again, you usually get a couple in the Atlantic basin early on, and we'll watch it. And again, some of those are typically closer to home. September, the peak of the season, on average about 3 to 4 named storms. And over the last 10 years, it's been even more than that. And usually from about August through mid-October, that's when it is very active. And of course, we'll keep you posted on everything regardless of when things develop during the hurricane season.
On Friday, August 13th, 2004, Major Hurricane Charlie changed course, barreled into southwest Florida at Punta Gorda as a Category 4 hurricane. 100-mile-per-hour winds swept right through the I-4 corridor with hurricane-force winds over Orlando at sunset. Hundreds of thousands were without power, some for weeks. Blue tarps sprung up like weeds on rooftops across the area. Whether you're planning to ride out the storm at home or evacuate to a more secure shelter, it's important to plan ahead of time to get your home and family ready. Rusty has more on that.
Tom, we say it every year, preparation is key. And in the event a hurricane heads towards Central Florida, you may either choose or be required to evacuate. Knowing what to have in that hurricane kit and how to correctly harden your property can save you a lot of headaches after the storm. Several steps should be made to your property to secure it before a hurricane arrives. Make sure lightweight items like lawn chairs are stored inside so they don't become flying projectiles. Board up windows or use hurricane shutters, and make sure to clean out gutters. If you must evacuate, make sure you have a fully stocked hurricane supply kit, including plenty of water and food, as you may be gone from your home for several days. A flashlight, battery-powered radio, first aid kit, and extra clothes are all things you should have in your kit. Fill prescriptions, bring important documents, and remember pet supplies. Now, when you return to your home, power could be out for several days, and many of you will use a generator for power. But generators can be dangerous if not used properly. Here's a shocking statistic for you. The leading cause of death from last year's hurricane season wasn't storm surge or wind. It was carbon monoxide poisoning. In fact, in the last 4 years, there's been more deaths from carbon monoxide poisoning than from storm surge. So take these steps when you use a generator. Never use a generator inside your home or garage, even if doors and windows are open. Only use generators outside, at least 20 feet away from your home. Install a battery-operated or battery backup CO detector near every sleeping area in your home. You can find more information on hurricane preparedness on WFTV.com.
So there's so much to get ready, getting the kids ready, getting your property ready, and make sure you're safe with those generators.
Absolutely. Believe it or not, again, that's the #1 killer in recent years, Tom.
Yeah, just misuse of generators. George?
It's been 5 years since Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico, and the island continues to recover. Many who fled for Central Florida are building their lives here. Alexa Lorenzo has the inspiring story of one of those new Floridians.
If you want something, you gotta go get it. Like, nobody's gonna get it for you.
This moment was years in the making. Achieving it, accomplishing it meant everything.
I wanted to cry, and then I thought about my makeup.
She couldn't ruin her look on one of the biggest days of her life.
My name is Ashley Ortiz Rosario. I'm from Dorado, Puerto Rico.
At 21 years old, Ashley was a year away from graduating from the University of Puerto Rico's Rio Piedras campus. But in September 2017, Hurricane Maria wreaked havoc in Puerto Rico. Ashley and her family left the island and moved in with loved ones who already called Central Florida home.
When I came here, there was like this little voice in my head saying, Ashley, I think this is it.
Within a few months, her mom and brothers went back to the island, but Ashley stayed.
It was our job to bring some ease and some hope to the Puerto Rican people. Immediately, we offered in-state tuition to every student who was displaced.
Ashley enrolled and eventually graduated from Valencia College, then UCF's Rosen College of Hospitality Management, and she wrote a popular song lyric on her graduation cap. Estoy en mi peak y voy a seguir en mi peak.
I'm in my peak, and I'm going to continue to be in my peak because that's how I feel.
And she was right. Shortly after graduation, she secured her dream job, talent acquisition at Walt Disney World. It took sacrifice, struggle, and strength, but she knew what others were telling her was true. Education was the pathway to her future.
I believe in my core that education changes lives.
It changed Ashley's. She moved from her island, lived away from her family.
And that is the hardest/best decision I've ever made.
Central Florida is home now, but Ashley is Boricua through and through.
Being Puerto Rican is who I am, so it's with me everywhere I go.
Alexa Lorenzo, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Still ahead tonight, we're setting the record straight on what the differences are between a Category 1 hurricane and a Cat 5 that can devastate entire cities. The National Hurricane Center uses the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Scale to measure storm strength and potential destruction. The scale looks at wind speed and assigns it to a 1 to 5 rating. A Category 1 hurricane has winds of 74 to 95 miles per hour. That can certainly cause roof damage to homes or large branches to snap. Hurricane Charlie in 2004 had weakened, but was still a Category 1 hurricane when it moved right over Central Florida.
Oh my God!
Winds that are 96 to 110 miles per hour are classified as a Category 2 hurricane. A Cat 2 can uproot trees, cause more major damage to homes, and cause power outages that can last for days to weeks. Hurricane Francis, which followed Charlie a few weeks after in 2004, was a Category 2 at landfall. It only gets worse from there as we now move into major hurricanes, Categories 3, 4, and 5. A Cat 3 has winds 111 to 129 miles per hour. You may remember Hurricane Katrina. It was a Category 3 at landfall in Louisiana, but was much stronger earlier on out in the Gulf of Mexico. A Category 4 hurricane has winds of 130 to 156, and destruction can be devastating to entire communities and make areas uninhabitable for weeks or months. Power outages will last weeks to possibly months as well. Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico as a top-end Cat 4. And a Category 5 hurricane has winds of 157 miles per hour or higher. These are rare. A high percentage of homes will be destroyed with total roof failure and walls collapsing. Hurricane Michael's 160-mile-per-hour winds devastated parts of the Florida Panhandle as only the 4th Category 5 hurricane to make landfall in the U.S. And you can count on the Eyewitness News team to track storms live on your TV. We also stream our coverage on the WFTV News app. You can also stay connected by following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Stay safe.